everybody, this is Brandon Finnigan, Director of Elections here at DDHQ. It's good to be back. I was a little bit sick during the last video, but my good friend Drew McCoy was able to give you a wonderful narrative of the races for June 7th. This week we're going to be looking at the races on June 14th in South Carolina, Maine, North Dakota, Nevada, and of course a special election down in Texas. Before we dive in, of course, like always, please be sure to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. If you enjoy these videos, be sure to click on the little bell so you're notified as soon as they are released, and give them a like. Let's go on and get into the business at hand, right? The elections. First up, South Carolina. Polls close here at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, I want to make it very important here. South Carolina is a runoff state. Candidates have to clear 50% of the vote to avoid a runoff election. The runoff election for South Carolina will be held just 2 weeks after this first round on June 28th. The biggest races of the night are the Republican congressional primaries in the 1st and 7th districts. Now, let's start with District 1. Okay, South Carolina 1. It's technically the swingiest district in the state, but probably not this year given the current political environment. Incumbent freshman Nancy Mace has had a rocky relationship, to say the least, with former President Donald Trump. She criticized him heavily after the events of January 6, 2021. She voted to certify the election. She did vote against impeachment, but then voted for the Steve Bannon contempt citation. Her opponent now, Katie Arrington, was the GOP nominee for the seat in 2018. Now, back then, she knocked off another Trump critic, incumbent Congressman Mark Sanford. Arrington went on to narrowly lose to Democrat Joe Cunningham, who Mace then unseated in 2020. The district stretches along the coast and includes portions of suburban Charleston and Beaufort. Now, the counties to watch if Arrington is going to have a solid shot at unseating the incumbent, it's going to be the counties that gave her the edge over Sanford just 4 years ago, Beaufort and Berkeley. Watch those counties very closely. Now let's slide over to the 7th district. Okay, now that district is kind of further up towards the northeast. It includes Myrtle Beach. Incumbent Congressman Tom Rice won office back in 2012. He's been reelected several times. He did vote for the second Trump impeachment, going so far as to call him a, quote, would-be tyrant. Recently spoke approvingly of Liz Cheney, who of course we know is a prominent Donald Trump critic. Limited polling, but a recent poll from the Trafalgar Group kind of shows Rice around 38% in a crowded field, so facing a potential runoff, with his main rival being State Representative Russell Fry, who has roughly 21% of the vote in that poll. The district forms a kind of a fat boomerang in the upper northeast of the state, including, like I said before, Myrtle Beach. It's overwhelmingly Republican, voted for Rice by over 20 points in 2020, and the winner in the primary is in no danger of losing it in the fall. Counties to watch, in my opinion, are Horry, Florence, and Georgetown. Now, in terms of who Donald Trump has endorsed, it shouldn't be any surprise that he's endorsed Arrington and Fry, respectively, in the 1st and 7th district. And remember, candidates have to clear 50% or they face the runoff 2 weeks later. Let's kind of move on to the 8 p.m. hour on primary night. Texas has a special election in the current 35th congressional district. It's being held because Democrat incumbent Philemon Vela resigned to take a job with the D.C. lobbying firm. Now, the district runs from roughly the Brownsville area in the south up kind of along, turning inland and out to the east of San Antonio. It kind of snakes on up. This is going to be under the current lines, the special elections under the current lines, not the ones coming into effect of January 2023. Republicans have been pouring resources into this race, an attempt not just to kind of set a narrative ahead of what they expect to be a good night in November, but also to test their Latino outreach efforts in a part of the state where those voters have been kind of moving right on into the party. Democrats were a little bit late to investing into this race, and begun have done to do so the last kind of week or so. It will become much more Democratic next year when redistricting kicks in, but that's really not what's driving the interest in the special. We have very few barometers right now, honestly, of the real state of things. People like to watch special elections, especially congressional ones, in the lead up to midterm elections. I think it kind of gives them a little bit of a taste of really what the environment looks like. So we're going to have to see how the outcome is in this nominally Democratic seat. Now let's kind of move on back northeast up to Maine. All right, polls close in Maine statewide 8 p.m. Eastern Time. There's not really much happening in primaries here, but there's some interesting races that'll get set up for November. In the northern 2nd District, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin is running for the GOP nomination. He hopes for a rematch with current Democratic Congressman Jared Golden. Golden won the seat in 2018 in the state's first use of ranked choice voting. Poliquin had held the lead after election night, but lost the race when 2 independents were eliminated in that first round of ranked choice voting. Voters' second picks, if you will, of those candidates. They favored Golden over Poliquin, so Golden got elected. The district is gigantic. It's very, very rural, stretches all the way up to the Canadian border, and it had been dominated by Democrats for years, until, frankly, the 2014 election cycle. Incumbent Governor Paul LePage infamously won re-election that year in a 3-way race by dominating his opponent who had represented the district. The 2nd District crushed it there and ended up going on to remain governor of the state for 4 more years. And the 2nd District also voted for Donald Trump twice, in 2016 and 2020, even as voters in Maine overall voted for Democrats at the presidential level statewide. So the state voters are bringing up Paul LePage. They're going to have that familiar name back on the ballot for governor. Now, he's running unopposed for the GOP nomination and is trying to knock out current incumbent Governor Janet Mills. LePage had infamously won twice, in 2010 and again in 2014, in split contests. And a lot of that, there were a lot of voters and a lot of people in the state that were really upset with the fact that someone had won by a plurality, by so small of a plurality back in 2010, and won re-election in 2014. They were trying to push for this effort for ranked choice voting. And an interesting little quirk in ranked choice voting in the state of Maine is that it does apply to state primaries, it applies to congressional elections, but it does not apply, because of the state constitution, to general gubernatorial elections. So yes, Paul LePage and Janet Mills could go off against each other with independent candidates at third or fourth position, and one of these two could end up winning a plurality, not winning an outright majority. Again, ranked choice voting does not apply to gubernatorial general elections. Let's slide things on over to Nevada, the Silver State. Now, 2 interesting congressional primaries here, both featuring incumbents that could possibly be denied renomination. First up, the 1st District. The incumbent Congresswoman, Dina Titus, Democrat, is facing a serious and well-founded challenger from the left by Amy Vilela. Vilela is endorsed by Cori Bush and Nina Turner, and the fundraising gap isn't as much as one would expect, considering Titus is running for her 5th term. This is a kind of toss-up-y district in this current environment. It voted for President Biden by about 8 points. Vilela could be considered by supporters of Titus to be a bit of a spoiler here, and she might be too progressive, and it's going to cost them the seat in November. Vilela may counter back that she's playing up to the base, and she's got base support. She's got the support of progressives. She may even fight for a lot of union workers' votes, and that she would have a better shot in November. That's going to be the kind of the argument and counter-argument you're going to see between the 2 of them. So this is a pretty important primary, and the Republicans have their own infighting, if you will. Moving on over to the 2nd District. Now, this features the sole Republican Congressman, Mark Amodei. And Mark Amodei is facing a pretty well-funded challenge from the right by Danny Tarkanian. And if that name sounds familiar, it should. Tarkanian has already lost a general election in the 3rd District to Rosen and the 4th District to Horsford. He's moved to northern Nevada to run in this very safe Republican district. If he does win the nomination, the district is not going to vote for Democrat in November. It just isn't. It's extremely red. Amodei is from Carson City, and he's going to want to really run up the score in Washoe County. Tarkanian is hoping to gain on him in the more rural counties, Elko, Lyon, Churchill. He doesn't have any home advantage because he is moving up from down south, down from Clark County area. They do have similar policy views. Tarkanian keeps kind of running for things and framing himself as the more conservative option. Amodei voted to certify the election, but also voted to expel Cheney. So That's going to be a race worth watching. 2 congressional primaries really worth watching in Nevada. Then, of course, there's the U.S. Senate primary on the Republican side. Very high profile. Winner is taking on incumbent Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. Now, Republicans may be very disappointed if they don't flip this one seat. They've been kind of pining for the idea that by 2024 they might be able to get, if they have a fantastic November, then 2024, because there's a lot more rural states with Democratic, rural or Republican-friendly states with Democratic incumbent senators they hope to knock off. Maybe they'll get to 60 seats come 2024. Well, along that road is Nevada, and you got to win the Nevada Senate race this year in order to try to hit that number in 2 more short years. Now, the former AG, Adam Laxalt, was the favorite for this race. All right, he was Trump endorsed, and a lot of party folk liked him, and he was supposed to be kind of a slam dunk endorsement, and it's for the former president, just like Herschel Walker down in Georgia. But Sam Brown has been surging in the polls and is running as an anti-establishment kind of candidate against Laxalt, who he's claiming is too nationally tied. Now, Brown is a big Trump supporter, but is attacking Laxalt still for being backed by the new GOP establishment, Trump. And he received the endorsement by the Nevada Republican Party. Brown winning would be a huge upset, considering what everyone's expectations were for Laxalt. It's still very important, of course, for Republicans in their primaries to be backing Trump and the America First agenda. But it may seem that endorsement isn't as incredibly important now in primary voters' minds as it may have been in earlier races this year, or even in races or special elections in 2021. But we'll have to see how it goes. Laxalt can still pull this off. He is, in my opinion, still kind of the favorite in this race. We'll just have to see what plays out on the 14th. Now, North Dakota is the final state of the night, but there's just really not much happening here in the primaries, or expected in November either. It's a split time zone state. So for those of you real true election junkies who really want to watch those primaries in North Dakota, don't expect anything until around 9 p.m. Mountain Time. That's when all the polls close in the state. It's roughly 11 p.m. Eastern Time for those of you here on the eastern coast of the U.S. That's going to pretty much wrap things up for us here at Decision Desk as in terms of our preview for the 14th. We'll be back next week with a look at the 21st primaries. There's going to be a handful of House elections in Virginia. There's going to be runoffs in Arkansas and in Georgia and Alabama. The big race of the night there, of course, will be Katie Britt versus Mo Brooks for the U.S. Senate nomination in the state of Alabama. Anyway, there's always something happening here at the Decision Desk. There's always something happening in the election world, of course, and we cover it all here. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, and sign up for new video notifications. Until then, I'm Brandon Finnigan. Thank you very much for watching.